Hello everyone, I am back from my holidays ready to conquer the world, or at least that's the hope. The first video you're seeing from me is going to be not including my face because we're going to do a couple of comparison swatches. I picked up the I Need a Nude palette when I was on holiday. I just sort of accidentally stumbled upon it in the only Sephora in Sofia which carries, I think, Natasha Denona, because I'd never actually seen a display of Natasha Denona. It was the Sephora that carries both Natasha and Pat. I've actually seen a Natasha Denona display before, but it was also the first time I saw a display of Pat McGrath labs, and I was so overjoyed seeing both of these, and especially some of the newer releases that I could swatch, more from Natasha, not really from Pat, that yeah, I almost peed myself with excitement. But I know a lot of you are very excited to hear my thoughts about this palette, to see me do some looks with it, and I'm going to do a review of this palette, I think, sometime this week after I've tested it a little bit more. But I know for a fact that more so than that, a lot of you are just burning with curiosity if your Pat McGrath Labs collection has you covered in terms of the color story of the I Need a Nude palette. Can you replicate what's in here with your Pat McGrath Labs collection? So I decided to just open with that video because it's Sunday, I have time to film it, and I'm not really sure I'm going to have time to film this during the week when I want to do my review of the palette. So here we are, starting off with some comparison swatches between the palettes that I could think of that have similar shades and the I Need a Nude palette from Natasha Denona. Alright, so here you've got a side-by-side of the I Need a Nude and the Divine Rose 1 palette from Pat. Honestly, I don't think these are anything alike. There are a couple of very cool toned eyeshadows in here, but I really don't think that any of them truly encapsulates what is in the I Need a Nude palette. But just for shits and giggles, let's do a couple of comparison swatches. Okay, so looking at these two palettes, the similar-ish types of shades would obviously be this mauvey rosy shade here. We could also swatch the warmer shade that is here, but I don't think they're really going to be alike. But for shits, we can swatch them. We can also swatch this shade against this one, although I think they are extremely different from each other. And obviously we can do the two browns, although I think you can already tell just by looking at the eyeshadows that this one is significantly darker and cooler toned compared to the one from Pat. But let's just swatch. Alright, so here you have the shade from Natasha, or actually the shades from Natasha. I'm now going to swatch. This is the shade Vague, this is the shade Vit. I think Vit is warmer, definitely a little bit more peachy, I would say, so I don't think it's going to be anything quite like Pat, but just for shits we can swatch it. And now I'm going to go into this shade here, which I think is going to be much more purple and much more cool toned. And as you can see, they are quite different from each other. Let's swatch the two browns. So let's start with the one from Natasha, right here. And then do the one from the Divine Rose 1 palette from Pat, which, as you can see, is a lot warmer toned. But just for a reference, here you have the dark brown from I Need a Nude, and here you have the one from the Divine Rose 1 palette. I think there are browns in Pat's collection that come closer to this, but it is not in the Divine Rose 1 palette. Okay, so I hear people comparing the shade Muse here to Astral Solstice from Pat McGrath. Now, first and foremost, these are two completely different eyeshadows in terms of their texture. This is a baked Astral, whereas this is just a pressed flaky glittery shade, but also they're completely different eyeshadows in my opinion. But if I'm going to convince you, I'm just going to have to swatch them, aren't I? So let me swatch them. So this is the shade from Natasha, and here I'm going to swatch Astral Solstice. So first of all, the shade from Natasha actually has a bit of a base color. I don't know whether that's really coming across on camera. I'm going to move my hand here a little bit in the light so that you can see. This has a somewhat almost warmer browny base, and then it has an overlay of sparkles. And I'm going to shine an artificial light. I think in terms of the sparkles, they both have that beautiful wet finish effect. I think the shade from Pat may be a little bit sparklier, and the overlay of the shade from Natasha might have a similar, you know, sparkly effect to it, similar glitter. But overall, I would say they are different shades, although technically the purpose that they would serve for you might be similar. Like, I would still use this as a topper shade, although given the texture of this and how much flakier it is, you have to be super careful, because otherwise you can create a lot of texture with an eyeshadow like this. So I think this is as far as the comparison swatches go with the Divine Rose 1 palette. I truly do not see other eyeshadows in here that are even remotely comparable. I actually want to go into Subliminal because I have suspicions that in terms of the mattes, we're going to find some similarities with the Subliminal palette. And now that we have the two eyeshadow palettes open, I think this is still going to be very different from the one in the Subliminal palette, the deep brown. But I would like to swatch them because they are now close to each other, so it's a bit easier. Okay, so can you see that these have slightly different tones to them? This leans almost a little bit more charcoal gray compared to the one from the I Need a Nude, which is, I think, more of like a true brown. Then I'm going to swatch the three like more mid-tone browns here to compare to Ultimate Taupe. So first I'm going to swatch Stone, which is like a more gray-toned brown. This shade is going to look extremely unflattering on people with warmer undertones. It's actually one of my least favorite shadows in this eyeshadow palette. Then I'm going to swatch the shade Mesh, which is quite similar but has somewhat more brown undertones to it. I found these two to be completely redundant within the same palette, despite the fact that they have slightly different undertones. And last but not least, I'm going to swatch the shade Tender right here. I'm going to have to make spacing a little bit, actually. And now, in the most inconvenient spot on my hand, let's put the shade Ultimate Taupe from Pat right here. So I hope you can appreciate that all of these eyeshadows have a somewhat more pink gray undertone to them, whereas this is cool, but it still retains its more like brown undertone. At least that's how I interpret it. So yes, these two mattes are probably the closest you're going to get to the mattes that are in the I Need a Nude palette, but honestly, if we're going to be completely nerdy about it, I think that they have like totally different undertones to them, and I want to warn those of you especially who have somewhat warmer undertones and struggle with like grayer, more like taupe based browns. These might look quite unflattering on you. Like for me, for example, Ultimate Taupe is already pushing it, and out of the I Need a Nude palette, I actually don't particularly like this on myself. I like this one a bit more because it is slightly more brown on the eye. And this one is like a somewhat like more mid-tone version possibly of the deep brown in the Subliminal palette. A bit more brown and again a bit more gray. Alright, I've cleaned off my hand and I thought we could start swatching a little bit of the metallics now. There is this like more taupey gray metallic that is present in Subliminal. We could compare it to the shades, for example, Travertine and Delilah, because those are the only ones that I feel like are somewhat similar. So let me swatch Travertine and Delilah. Delilah is actually, I think, one of those new, like, sparklier type formulas, whereas Travertine is more of a satin type of finish, which is actually more like the shade from the Subliminal palette, but I can assure you they're going to be very different. This is much deeper and, again, much more almost like charcoal by comparison. So this is the shade from Subliminal, this one here in the middle of the palette, as you can see. Quite a different shade, both in terms of its depth and its undertones. Both of these are somewhat more like neutral browns, whereas I think this is more like a true cool charcoal kind of brown in a satin formula. So there you have it. Alright, I've got here the Moonlit Seduction palette because there are some cooler toned eyeshadows in here. In particular, I thought we could compare the two browns. although the deep brown, the silhouette shade from the I Need a Nude palette now looks to have a different undertone if I look at the pans, but yeah, let's compare them just to make sure. So this is the deep brown from the Moonlit Seduction palette from Pat, and as you can see, this one almost has more like brown red undertones, and this one is a little bit more neutral cool leaning from the Moonlit Seduction palette. But yeah, on the eye, are they really going to look all that different from each other? Probably not. Then I don't really think they're going to be anything alike, but the only like further similarity between these two palettes is probably the shade Mia, so the pinky topper type shade, and the lilac shade from Moonlit Seduction. So let's just swatch those to see how they look like next to each other. Actually, this looks like it might be more similar to this shade, but let's just swatch both of them for funsies. Again, very different textures. The ones from Pat are, I think, a bit more impactful. And then the rosy shade from Pat. So the shade here from Natasha, the shade Mia, looks almost a little bit more cooler toned when you look at the pan, I think, because you see more like those like purpley reflects, whereas when you swatch it, it comes across a bit more like neutral, almost warm leaning pink shade. This is definitely a very cool toned like lavender lilac, and this is a rose gold. So still quite different, I would say. I don't really see any further similarities here. Let's do a quick check if any of the metallic shades in the I Need a Nude palette are similar to this taupe shade here from the Voyeuristic Vixen quad. And honestly, I almost feel like this is a lot warmer than some of the shades in here. I thought possibly this shade is similar to the shade Filigree, so let's maybe quickly swatch those. So this is Filigree from the I Need a Nude palette. This is a really beautiful shade, definitely one of my favorites from the palette. Okay, and now let's swatch the shade from Voyeuristic Vixen, which, as expected, almost looks a bit warmer in tone compared to Filigree from I Need a Nude. So here you have Filigree from Natasha Denona versus whatever this shade is called, versus Twilight Bronze from the Voyeuristic Vixen quad. So there you have it. One last comparison I thought we could make is with this corner over here from the Celestial Nirvana palette. So these neutrally cooler leaning shades here remind me of some of the shades that are in the I Need a Nude. So I've cleaned off my hand and I think we can do some last comparison swatches. I'm going to once again swatch all of these like lighter type browns from I Need a Nude. And I'm also going to swatch the deep brown, because there is a deeper brown also in Celestial Nirvana. Okay, and now I'm going to swatch the mid-tone brown and the deep brown from Celestial Nirvana right here. I actually like the textures in Celestial Nirvana, like the mattes are a little bit smoother and softer. The ones in the I Need a Nude are a little bit harder. Not that they perform poorly, it's just that they're quite different also in terms of their texture. And from what I can tell, also in terms of their undertones, they're totally different. This is much more of like a mahogany leaning brown in comparison to this, which is much like deeper in tone and more brown. The like mid-tone brown from Celestial Nirvana is also much less cool toned compared to all of these three shades from the I Need a Nude palette, so that is also not a straight up dupe. So I think now we're left with a couple of the metallic shades in here that might be similar to the metallic in the Celestial Nirvana. So I'm going to swatch again Ella and Filigree, because I think those are the ones that truly remind me of this shade from Celestial Nirvana. I don't think that any of these other shades are any similar. And now let's do the brown from Celestial Nirvana. I would not necessarily call them straight up dupes from each other. I think this is still a little bit deeper in tone, but I would say in terms of like how similar they are, the shade from Celestial Nirvana, so this one over here, is possibly the most similar to the shade Filigree from the I Need a Nude palette. Not a straight up dupe, but like the closest. So I think I'm going to hereby conclude this comparison swatch video, because I truly cannot think of any other eyeshadows that Pat McGrath has made that are quite in the same color family as the I Need a Nude palette. From this point onwards, you just need to decide for yourself how important it is for you to have this specific undertone. I think the specific undertone that predominates in this palette is like pink and gray. So if these tones, like these sort of neutral cool tones, are something that really appeals to you and you think you're going to get a lot of use out of, then I don't think you have something competing in your collection in terms of Pat McGrath Labs. Pat McGrath Labs has never really done quite these undertones. But if you want to get in the ballpark of this color story, then there are plenty of eyeshadows in your collection that are sort of similar to this color story. So it really comes down to how intent are you on having these specific undertones of brown shades from the I Need a Nude palette. Since I'm still to do my actual like review of this palette and looks with it, if I've missed some comparison swatch that you thought was absolutely crucial to this video, please do let me know. I will gladly do some more comparison swatches for you in that video. But I think for now I've covered it all. I hope this was useful to you. Thank you so much for watching. We will see each other face to face very soon to chat a little bit about my holidays and, you know, do a couple of fun videos. But in the meantime, like I said, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!